Everyone's favourite Scottish nationalist Humza Yusuf made an interesting tweet and video over the weekend. I'm assuming the intention of this was to show evil bigots and racists how vital Islam and Muslims have been to the development of global civilization. Yet as you'll see, beneath the typical PC let's sit down and have a good old chinwag and a cup of schmooze, this is actually exposing the fault lines of multiculturalism in Britain and why it's inevitably going to lead to balkanisation. Now, just to be clear at the outset, and for anyone who's not au fait with British culture, when someone in Britain says, "What has X group done for us?" it's a callback to the famous scene in A Life of Brian from Monty Python, where they speak about what the Romans have done for us, and despite disliking them, it turns out they've done quite a lot.
All right, but apart from the sanitation, the medicine, education, wine, public order, irrigation, roads, a fresh water system and public health, what have the Romans ever done for us? Brought peace? Oh, peace! Shut up!
So clearly this is Humza's attempt at doing the same against those evil, bigoted Europeans. However, I've seen many people rip apart his claims already online, but I'm going to try and be more charitable. I think it's important to do that, because then we understand the issues all the more clearly.
Here's why Muslims suck. We invented algebra. Yep, that's right. Those miserable maths classes that you had to sit through, that was us. I'm sorry.
Now, many have pointed out that the Babylonians in 1800 BC were using basic algebraic methods to solve problems. The Greeks too were doing the same in the 3rd century. I think what Humza is talking to is the quote father of algebra, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, a 9th century Persian mathematician. He formulated algebra as an independent discipline. Now, there's no doubt this is a highly important achievement and it deserves a lot of accolade, but to state Muslims invented algebra, it's a bit of a stretch. I mean, as I say, it's more formulated after working on the back of the Greeks. Now, this isn't a criticism. Of course, large swathes of Western culture are rooted in the Greek philosophical tradition. So I think it's fair to say Humza might be pushing the boundaries of the truth a bit there, but he's on roughly solid ground, and I said it'd be charitable, so let's give him that one.
Oh, and coffee. That morning latte that you can't possibly function without. That was also us. A Yemeni Sufi brewed up the first batch.
Now, this one has drawn particular ire online for a couple of reasons, and that's because no one really knows the true origin of coffee. The mainline accepted theory is that it came from Ethiopian farmers. I'm historically illiterate, basically, and even I knew that one. And also, referencing lattes, we all know that comes from the Italians. The Ethiopians may have discovered coffee, but the Italians popularised it and sent it around the world, much like the English invented football, but the Brazilians took it to a new level. And given the Ethiopians are East African Orthodox Christians and the Italians are, well, Roman Catholic Europeans, I don't think this one can be put down to Muslims. Sorry, Humza, old chap, that one just seems a bit zany.
Hospitals, we pioneered them too. The first ones with wards, with mental health care, and even licensing exams for doctors. If you ever survive surgery or have been prescribed antibiotics, then that's on us too.
Now, I've researched this one quite heavily, and again, it's full of grey areas with one very, very big stumbling block, which you can probably already tell we'll get to in a minute. But I think Humza is referring here to the Bimaristan Argun in Baghdad, an effective sort of hospital which was built in the 8th century. Now, there are counterclaims here. For instance, in ancient Greece, they had sanctuaries called Asclepiae. They were dedicated to the god of medicine, Asclepius, and served as rudimentary hospitals and centres for both worship and healing. St Bartholomew's Hospital in London also holds the claim as being the longest running hospital. That started around 900 years ago. But more importantly, the real issue here is Humza is doing with medical care what he did with coffee. I mean, he actually says if you've ever survived surgery or been given antibiotics, you should thank Muslims. That's absolutely appalling, given the huge contributions European Christians have made to medicine. If we listed all of the things European Christians have invented in this regard, we'd be here all day. But I think now we're getting to the heart of what's going on here. This isn't about pushing back against the evil racists who are lying about Islam. It's an ethno-religious humble brag on par with that Indian father from the show Goodness Gracious Me, who's extremely patriotic.
Superman's my favourite superhero.
Ah, well, I can understand that. He's so brave, so strong, so Indian.
Oh, I love that sketch. Anyway, let's see what Humza's got for us next.
optics and camera tech. That was my man, Ibn al-Haytham. Without him, there'd be no selfies, which, now that I come to think about it, we might owe the world an apology for.
Oh, I told you there'd be schmooze. Just try and grin and bear it, folks. We'll be over soon. Now, I think you know what's coming. Ibn al-Haytham is known as the father of optics indeed. However, despite how amazing his contributions were, he was again basing his work on the Greeks. And he's doing the coffee trick again when he says we should thank Muslims for the iPhone. Of course, he's jumping over mountains of technological innovation in the Western world. And of course, ignoring the iPhone itself is a Western innovation. As is the internet too, by the way, something Humza is gleefully using to impart his wisdom on us knuckle-dragging Europeans. Anyway, last one before we start wrapping this up.
Also clocks. Mechanical clocks, to be precise. So if you've ever been late to school, been late to work, or a date, blame 12th century Muslim engineers who just had to get prayer times exactly right.
Now look, this is the same dynamic again. It's a grey area. Some Muslims were involved, although they were building on the work of people before them, and not to mention the more modern day technological innovations that we very much shouldn't be thanking Muslims for. But what is this all really about? As I say, on one level it's about political correctness and being the progressive hero while having a little ethno-religious humble brag while you're at it. Humza's display here actually undermines the very multiculturalism he's supposed to promote in his politics. Throughout this, Humza is referring to Muslims as a unique collective. Now you may remember a while ago I covered Anna Soubry and Wes Streeting's report on Islamophobia that told us to collectivise Muslims in that way was Islamophobic. Further still, as many of you may have noted, many of the inventions Humza puts down to quote Muslims were actually just created by Persians who of course had an ancient civilization, conquered parts of the Greek Empire and of course parts of the Roman Empire too. So claiming many of these inventions for the quote Muslims is akin to a Ugandan claiming all of the inventions of Europe because they're both Christian. And Humza, the progressive anti-colonialist that he is happy to ignore that many of these inventions came about because Muslim armies conquered parts of Greece and the Roman Empire, thereby taking their knowledge. Seems to be alright to have imperialism when they do it, hey? Now I know dealing with things like this is annoying, but in the grand scheme of things these are probably quite good for many of us, because after all it shows that these people like Humza don't think about themselves as Western liberal individuals, they think themselves as part of a group, deeply collective in their nature. Now to be clear, in principle I've got nothing against Muslims. I know they've got their own tradition, their own paths to God, they have their own way, I may not agree with it all, but it's none of my business, more power to them. What I object to is propaganda like this being used to justify mass immigration and multiculturalism in Europe, especially when the people pushing this stuff don't adhere to these views that they want us to hold themselves. But look, this is all part of the slow awakening process the Western world is presently in. We're still somewhat comatose by the promises of money and leftist liberal ideology, but slowly, more and more people are realising this is all built on foundations of sand. Do let me know your thoughts about all this below. Join the Substack if you want exclusive material and to connect with me. And do consider subscribing to the channel if you know.